Bethune, South Carolina was 7 miles down Highway number 1 from where I taught at McBee High School for many years back in the 1980s and 1990s. There was a bridge crossing Lynch's River which separated the two small towns and formed the dividing line between Chesterfield and Kershaw counties. Because the two schools were in two different counties, they were in two different school districts. McBee was in Chesterfield County and was separated from the larger cities of Chesterfield County by the National Forest and Wildlife Refuge. There are 25 miles separating McBee from the nearest town in Chesterfield County. Because of this, the school has students who literally live 2 hours away from each other by school bus. Bethune is also separated from the more populous areas of Kershaw County. The Kershaw County School District had 3 small schools they decided to combine. None of the 3 would agree to go to school at an existing school, and each wanted to maintain their own identity. The district literally bought land equidistant from all 3 schools out in the country in the middle of nowhere, thinking that would solve their problem. It didn't. The people of Bethune refused to bus their children to the new school and continued to be a separate school for a number of years. So because of this, you had 2 small schools located very close to each other who were intense rivals. Sports betting is a big moneymaker today. It was huge the week of the McBee-Bethune game. People bet money they didn't have on this game. You lose this one when you were favored, and there were going to be a lot of angry people. It'd be the same if you didn't cover the spread. Now, of course, different folks made up their own spreads according to how rabid a fan they were. So there's no real way of knowing if you covered it or not, at least not until the game was over and somebody was mad. Everyone was always excited about the game, no matter the record of the 2 schools, and no matter if it were football or basketball. You could count on the stands and the sidelines being full. Emotions ran high. I learned about the intensity of the game the very first year I was at McBee. When we went back to the bus after the game, someone from Bethune had put a dead cat on the bus. It was not recently deceased. You also learned that when riding the bus home from Bethune, it was a good idea to put the windows up and to duck as you approached the Lynch's River Bridge. There would be rocks and other debris hurled in your direction. Now, they had quite a setup at their stadium. I remember they had a light pole directly behind the goalpost on one end. There was this lever that you pushed up and down to turn the stadium lights on or off. It was on that pole for some reason. Again, right behind the goalpost, outside the end zone. One night, with the game well in hand, as usual, our kicker's extra point attempt went through the upright and struck the lever dead on, causing it to drop and turn off the lights. One of the players looked over at me and said, "I guess that means we have enough. It's time to go home." Because of the intensity of the games with Bethune, we started playing them twice a year in football. We'd play them early in the year as a non-conference game and then late in the year as a conference game. Each of us got a home game and a huge gate out of that agreement. Most years we handled them easily. Some years it was too easy. In 1990, we opened the season with them and we beat them 54-0. We used a running clock the entire second half and played subs the entire second half. So when the second game came around later in the season at our field, we knew what to expect. We jumped out to a 28-0 lead in the first quarter. We were up 48-0 in the second quarter when I put in the subs. They scored a couple of times on our subs and pulled within 48-14 at the half. As we left the field, we had to go across their side of the field, down by the end zone, to get to where we went at halftime. They were waiting on us. I have never been motherfucked as much in my entire career as I was that night leaving the field at halftime. They even had some of their volunteer coaches joining in, cursing our players and coaches. That was their mistake. After we had gotten such a big lead, our players had let down a little bit. Now they came out for the second half really fired off. Bethune kicked off to Chris Alford, who set the state record for kick return touchdowns during his career earlier in the season. As he broke free up the sideline, they threw water bottles at him, and they even turned their water cooler full of ice over on him as he ran past on his way to the end zone. I let my emotions get the better of me. I left the starters in the game until there were only 2 minutes left to play. Chris tied another state record, this one for touchdowns in a game with 8, and we beat them 75-14. Now, they also refused to play with a running clock when I offered it to him. It's partly on them. They also even matter because after the last touchdown, we went for 2 instead of kicking. We honestly didn't kick because Chris, who was our kicker, was too tired from running up and down the field on them. Chris's record-breaking performance made headlines, and when the Associated Press reporter called the opposing coach about Chris's performance, he didn't want to talk about the performance. He wanted to talk about me running up the score. Now, he left out me pulling the starters before halftime, his refusing a running clock, they're cursing at us at halftime, them throwing the water bottles and the cooler at Chris as he ran up the sidelines. All of that was left out of his account. Now, the reporter also called us on Monday morning. Unfortunately, I was in Columbia at an athletic director's meeting. Instead of telling them to wait and call back after I got back to school, the office staff put on one of my assistant coaches on the phone. It was Coach Bird. So if you listen to an earlier podcast about him, or you know him, you're not going to be surprised by what happened next. He wasn't very diplomatic. He hadn't spent a lot of time dealing with the press. He hated Bethune, and so he simply told them, it's their job to stop us, and that's all I have to say. So that's what the Associated Press went with. I got hate mail, lots of it. It came from as far away as Oregon and Vermont. When the Associated Press picked up the story in those days, it could end up running in local newspapers all over the country. I tried to defend us by trying to get our side out, but I was too far behind. Every time I tried to give the circumstances, it was back to us running up the score, and it's their job to stop us. After this went on for most of a week, Mr. Baker called me in and said, that's it, no more. I argued we weren't being pictured fairly. He said he didn't care. Never argue with someone who buys ink by the gallon, he said. Not another word to the press about this ever again. I did get a letter from a retired English teacher from McBee, Miss Earlene Bolts. Miss Bolts could not understand why they were saying such awful things about me when she knew what a wonderful man I was. Miss Bolts' letter made it much easier to let it go. It got to the point at Bethune where they struggle to hire and keep coaches. They struggle to keep players. Honestly, so did we. But they also struggle to discipline them. It got to the point where we pretty much waited for the point in the game where we got a big enough lead for them to quit. Literally quit. Some of them would invariably get into actual fights with one another. Well, they'd try to fight us, but eventually they'd fight one another. And if they weren't fighting one another, there would be some who would just pull off their pads in the middle of the game, throw them on the sidelines, and walk off. One year they'd even gone out and recruited some players before the game. Yep, pulling off that equipment and leaving early in the second half was just what you could see coming with that move. One year during driver's education, we drove over to exchange film, one of the perks of being a coach driver's education teacher. I took the 3 driver's education students in with me, teacher supervision. Asked where to find the coach, and they directed me to the locker room in the coach's office. When we got back there, their star player and some girl were making out on the gym mats outside the coach's office. They didn't seem to be the least bit bothered that someone walked in on them. Our students were like, what in the? Anyhow, I asked where to find the coach, and they pointed me to his office. He's in there watching film with another player. Now, I knew they lost on Friday night, but I didn't know a lot of the details, so I asked him how it went. We were scared of him, he said. They hand the ball off to that big running back, we'd scatter like a bunch of guineas on the 4-lane. We talked a few minutes, exchanged the videotapes, and he walked me out, right past the 2 on the mats, still kissing and hugging. You gonna watch that film later? He asked the star player. The kid said he would. Coach said okay, and that was that. When I got back to school, put the film in, I found out he's right. They looked like a bunch of guineas scattering on a 4-lane. When we played them on Friday night, they looked like a bunch of guineas scattering on a 4-lane. Now, the year that we beat them 75-14 in football, they had an outstanding basketball team. They were very highly ranked in the state, and they had a marquee player. Their gym was packed when we went over there to play, and they were looking forward to paying us back from football. But during that week, Mr. Baker decided to have some fun with them. He decided it was time for one of his prank phone calls. He had read that they were going to travel to California to play, pretty much unheard of in those days, and that they were fundraising to pay for the trip. He decided he'd have Sports Illustrated give them a call. He brought in Tom Buckland to make the call. He knew they didn't know Tom, and Tom also, as they used to say, had the gift of gab. He liked to talk. Mr. Baker gave him the number for the office at Bethune and told him to get the basketball coach on the line. Tell him you're from Sports Illustrated and that you want to do a story on the small town team making the big time going to California. Now again, Tom was something else. I'll have some more stories about Tom further down the road. But at any rate, Tom calls over. He got the coach, Speedy Johnson, and kept him on the phone for 30 minutes. He was perfect. Questions were perfect. The follow-ups to Speedy's answers were excellent. And if we didn't know better, we would have believed that Tom was actually from Sports Illustrated. He was, after all, a master of bullshit. The folks in Bethune let everyone know about the article in Sports Illustrated that would be coming out soon about them. They rubbed it in our faces. We never said anything. When nothing ever came out, they couldn't understand what happened. And we just suddenly asked them about the article. And we commiserate with them. about what had happened. And then we get together and laugh our asses off. So we played them in the last regular season game at their gym. Is beyond packed. Chris Alford hit a shot in the final seconds to beat them. We just had more laughs. Now I'm going to be honest with you right now. If I were still coaching and I was playing those fuckers on Friday night, I'd run it up again. See you next week.